There's an absolute luxury, or even an art form, to going against what's considered normal of being chronically online. The norm today is to be reachable 24/7, available to everybody and anybody on a whim, or otherwise constantly feeding yourself an endless stream of content day to day, whether or not you even care about it. And sure, while there's an absolute massive benefit to having the entire world of information in our pockets at any moment's notice, this also comes with a good chunk of downsides, one being that we pay for it with our constant attention. Over the last couple of years, there's also been a large resurgence across multiple generations of people simply wanting to disconnect a little bit more, which is why terms like dumb phone or even touch grass has exploded in search volume. Why it's now considered a luxury to disconnect at least is because it's actually incredibly rare. And while there are multiple definitions of the word luxury, the one that sort of stuck with me is that luxury is something that gives you pleasure or an advantage which you don't usually have. And right now, at least for a lot of people, that's going offline. For myself at least, it started as a bit of an experiment back in November 2024 to just sort of use a dumb phone for a week, and that 7 days turned into 10 blissful months of breaking my screen addiction and sort of rediscovering what it means to actually live life, as corny as it sounds. There was no checking my phone immediately as I get out of bed, no hopping on Microsoft Teams while brushing my teeth just to check work messages on time that's still supposed to be my own, and no longer reaching for my phone at every moment of boredom. What I've personally learned over the last while is reclaiming what little time we have for the things that matter shouldn't be considered luxury, yet it is a luxury that we can actually afford. For some people, it might be deleting all the social apps off your phone. For some, it's as simple as going on Do Not Disturb mode. And for myself, it's been using some sort of minimalist device like my Mudita Compact. Now, when people think about going offline or paring back their smartphone usage, there can often be a sense of discomfort or even anxiety about not being able to be connected, which is actually completely normal, frankly. Just as somebody might be quitting some sort of substance, there can be almost a withdrawal period, that constant flinch to reach for your phone at any moment of boredom, restlessness, and yes, even sometimes irritability. What I can say is, personally at least, that period where you instinctively reach for your phone does go away after about a week or two, and that's usually when life starts to look a little bit different for some people. Instead of scrolling, where 10 minutes can often turn into 45, I find myself reading, maybe playing guitar, or even something like video games. And just as it would be with going to the gym or learning a new skill, being present almost takes practice until you're sort of comfortable with it. I can say as well, I don't totally cut socials out entirely. I simply give myself permission to check it through something like my iPad or maybe a computer, which I personally find a lot less accessible or otherwise just less doom scrolly in general. Now, this isn't going to be the end all be all when it comes down to something like this, and surely mileage will vary from person to person, but since living this luxurious life of disconnection, as I like to call it, I find my moods are remarkably better. I'm far more present for the people that matter, and allowing myself to get my dopamine hits from something like walking, lifting, and climbing, which are things I actually look forward to now. And weirdly enough, after a while, those daunting things don't really seem so bad. And it's really hard not to sound like a pretentious douchebag when it comes to stuff like this, but we get so used to what's considered normal that we can almost seem pretentious or weird for doing something abnormal like being offline. Recently though, again based off of search volumes, even in subreddits that are fast growing like /r_dumbphone, people really are trying to reclaim some of their own time and attention back from our addictive devices. For me at least, there's just a freedom in simply being okay with leaving my phone wherever it might be in my house, and if I miss a notification, I'm okay with it. And I don't really get anxious anymore going from my desk to my kitchen without my phone. And I can say it's been maybe 15 years since I last had the same feeling. As far as devices go as well, let's be real, it is still 2025 and the world isn't the same as it was in 2005, for example, and there is a certain level of connectedness that actually does become a necessity versus a want. I've personally got 2 kids in school, each of which have an application I need access to. Naturally, my day job and banking require 2-factor authentication, which leads me to use a device like the Mudita Compact, which I have been using for the last 5 weeks or so. Full disclosure, this part of the video is sponsored by Mudita, but truthfully, I've been using this device on and off over the last year, and it sort of remains a staple for the times I actually want to disconnect a little bit more, since mostly people like myself can't realistically use the most basic of flip phones in today's modern age. This one specifically, while still being a minimalist phone, surprisingly gives me most of the apps I could ever want to get through a connected age without the pull or the distraction of any sort of social media or endless feeds. While you can technically get away with installing something like Instagram or TikTok on here, being that it's an e-ink screen, this is pretty much unusable as a guest gets when it comes down to any sort of doom scrolling, but it still gives me all the things I actually need, which is something I really do appreciate on the regular. As somebody who started reading over the last year as well for the first time, thank you, by the way, to everybody who recommended the Red Rising series. I absolutely crushed this series, and I want to cry. But apart from the real thing of reading a book, as far as devices go, nothing really beats an e-ink screen for reading, which I'm happy to say has sort of replaced my previous scrolling. The reason something like this makes disconnecting a bit more realistic at least, is that I don't really have to give up creature comforts like my Apple Music. Music is simply a huge part of my identity, so I'm happy to have that and other apps I've been able to add to a device like this. Likewise, I've been doing the whole no screens thing at least an hour before bed, so that hour I would typically scroll in bed is actually replaced by journaling and of course reading. You'd think it would be common sense, but it's actually rather surprising how well journaling helps my mind become a little bit more restful at the end of a long day, instead of my mind just racing the second my head hits the pillow. Otherwise, I really do just enjoy the fact that I get more accustomed to just calling somebody, similar to when text messages used to charge 10 cents a pop. Back then at least, you would just call somebody, you chat, you'd reconnect, and move on, and I really dig that. For anybody who is interested in the Medita Compact, I will have this link down below. They do have some pretty awesome Black Friday deals, up to 25% off, so be sure to check the link in the description. As for everything I've talked about, I get how a lot of this might sound corny and lame, but a lot of us are simply exhausted by how much screen time we rack up without even really meaning to. Sometimes life itself is hard. Other times, our brains are simply fried from the constant dopamine taps we have built into every corner of our day-to-day. And I'm not pretending like I'll be using a minimalist phone forever. Even in the coming weeks, I will be checking out a brand new smartphone simply because they still interest me. But even just swapping on and off when I need to gives my mind the reset it needs. It allows me to enjoy those simple things again, the boring things, the more mundane things, the things that feel real to me at least. I find myself a lot more creative, and I'm not really comparing myself to other people that don't even know I exist, and I'm comfortable enough at this point that I find myself on a more simple device more and more frequently. At the beginning of 2025, my resolution wasn't to reinvent myself or to be more productive, but rather the opposite. I simply wanted to slow down and be more present, and as the year inches towards a close going on to 2026, it's gone better than I ever expected. I find myself reading more, getting a little bit more exercise, playing some more video games without having to make a video about it, and simply relaxing instead of scrolling. I get to be a little bit more present with my kids and let myself enjoy the evenings instead of trying to catch up on everything else, and it's hard not to think that this version of my life simply feels a lot better. If this sounds slightly familiar to you, maybe try giving your brain a little bit of space, try deleting those apps or shifting to a phone that's calm by default, and maybe you'll find, just like I did, that slowing down is a luxury we actually can afford.